this for YouTube. So there's the recording going. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on. In this area, it's the Yagara and Turrbal people. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge that because this is Zoom, we are going out to lots of places around Australia. And I'd like to acknowledge the elders of all of the Aboriginal people, of all of the lands that we're zooming out to in this strange new virtual world. So on that note, I'd like to also tell you guys a couple of things that are a bit of housekeeping. One of them is that there is a chat function in your Zoom. If you haven't Zoomed before, you could find the chat function, and in fact, I will show you where it is by putting a link to the book of the moment. So that is a link to purchase this beautiful shiny pink object. And if you head to the website and at the checkout, if you use the word event, E-V-E-N-T, that will give you a 10% discount off not just the book, but also any other books that you put in your cart for the next 24 hours. So it's time to go shopping. Now, on that note, I'm very, very excited to be involved in hosting this event tonight because Claire is a fantastic person who I adore. And I was very happy to begin reading this book today and to realize that I am going to thoroughly enjoy it. It really did provide a high point in my day. It's really fun. I recommend everybody get a copy. It's exactly what we need when you have been dealing with 2020, because it is a hoot and we all need a bit of a hoot. But I'm not going to tell you about it. We're going to listen to the woman herself, who will be in conversation tonight with Michelle Law. So I'm going to introduce you to Michelle, and then at the end of the event, feel free to use that chat function to ask any questions. So you can ask them at any time. They'll come through to me. Just type your questions into chat and they'll come straight through to me at any time. So without further ado, here is Michelle Law, who is a writer and actor working across print, theatre, film and television. She wrote the smash hit play, Single Asian Female, which you may not have been able to get a ticket to because it was all sold out. It's sold out sessions all across the country, and that apparently it continues to tour across Australia. I'm not quite sure how that's going in COVID, but we may find out. Her screenwriting work includes the SBS show Homecoming Queens, and she co-created, co-wrote and starred in that. Michelle has been awarded Queensland Premier's Young Publisher and Writer Award and 2 Australian Writers Guild Awards. Her last play, Miss Peony, will be staged at Belvoir Theatre at some point. One will hope there is a post-COVID theatre world happening, and if it happens, we'll all be there. Michelle Law, welcome.
Yay!
Hey, thanks, Chrissy. And I'd just like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal peoples of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm currently living and working, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm really, really excited to be launching Claire's book, which was officially released yesterday. So absolutely click on the link that Chrissy has provided and get yourself a copy. I've got mine here. It's a beautiful book. It's bright pink and it'll stand out on the bookshelves. Or, you know, buy it on the website now. We're not judging. I mean, we can see you or not, but highly recommend that. So it's my pleasure to introduce Claire Christian, who is a storyteller, a writer, theatre maker and facilitator. She has had 4 plays published by PlayLab, including Lyssa and the Freeborn Dames, which debuted at Le Boîte in 2018. She has also had the great joy.
Shall I say that bit? I think it says, of directing Michelle Law's smash hit play, Single Asian Female.
Claire's debut novel, Beautiful Mess, won the Text Prize in 2016. It's Been a Pleasure, Noni Blake is her first novel for adults. Can you please join me in welcoming Claire? Yay!
Yay! Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here.
I thought we could start tonight by hearing a short reading from Claire from her new book. Claire, if you could give us a bit of setup and a bit of context for this scene and what we're about to hear.
Sure. So I've picked a bit kind of from the middle. Noni has just had an encounter with a man. That's kind of all the context you need, I think, maybe. Let's see. I am a cliche. I'm sitting on the floor of Lyndall, that's her best friend, Lyndall's lounge room while he combs knits from my scalp. This is love, I tell him. I can't believe you slept with a guy who gave you knits. Lyndall giggles, stabbing my scalp with the comb. He didn't give me knits, his nephew gave me knits, and I didn't sleep with him. I still don't understand how this exchange happened. Well, his nephew's stuff was in the lounge room, including his Legionnaire's cap. I put it on and made a comment about no one looking sexy in a Legionnaire's cap. It became a thing. Please tell me you had sex while wearing a Legionnaire's cap. Very nearly. I seductively swing my knit-shampooed head around and peer at him, smiling. Please tell me the Legionnaire's cap got swept off in a moment of passion, then, he mutters. Exactly. I raise my eyebrows and we crack up laughing. Did you get too drunk and pass out, he asks. No, not at all. Why do I feel like you're holding out on me? Because I am. Why? What happened? Are you okay? I'm fine. I stop. I don't know. Embarrassed. I think I'm beige. What? In bed. Am I boring? I don't know. I doubt it. Did he say something? Did he call you boring? What a fuckwit. No. We didn't really have sex, or we did, but it was not what I'd usually do. You need to start using your words immediately. He is clinging to my shoulders and staring at me. It was messy. He likes to make a mess. I watch Lyndall's face process this, and his eyebrows almost fly off his forehead. What kind of mess? Ooh, tension.
Oh man, that is a messy scene. I now recall. I remember reading it and giving you a live feed of my reaction, being like, no, this can't be happening. Claire, thanks so much for sharing that reading. We had an email powwow before the event, just to talk about the book in general and what we wanted to discuss. I'm curious about how this idea for Noni came from the idea of if I only knew then what I know now.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, what are some things that you know now that you didn't know then?
I now need to think about, like, what do I actually want to know what do I know that I share? It came from, this idea of women, particularly in their 30s and 40s, talking about and using the sentence, particularly in reference to their bodies and particularly in reference to their sex lives, and kind of looking back on their younger selves and saying, if I felt the way I do about my body now, the way I would operate in the world then would have been different, or I may have not made that relationship choice, or maybe I would have slept with that person, or that was kind of the context of the conversations I kept having. And that made me go, oh, there is energy in this about a woman in her mid-30s who decides she needs to make some changes and maybe do the things she was too scared to do when she was younger. So I think for me, I love getting older, because the older I get, the more comfortable I get in everything about me. And also the less fucks I give about any of the kind of stuff I cared about when I was younger, whether it be my queerness, my body politics, my the ridiculous belief that no one on the planet would ever fancy me. Like, it's all of that stuff that was a waste of time gets easier and much, thankfully, 36-year-old Claire has let some of that go.
I feel like I'm listening to like a live podcast of Esther Perel.
Yes.
If everyone's familiar with Esther Perel, she is an amazing sex therapist who highly recommend checking out her stuff.
Highly recommend, yes.
And well, on that note, I mean, I'm curious about Noni's journey at the start, more towards the start of the book. Because in some early reviews of the book, there's been some contention about this character named Ben.
Yes.
Could you talk a bit about Noni's interaction with Ben and the role that he plays in her journey?
Yeah. So this is not a spoiler. The book, well, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's an early spoiler. Noni decides that she wants to go back and maybe do some of the things she'd wish she'd done when she was younger, and maybe sleep with some of the people she'd wish she'd slept with. So she tracks down this list of people, including a guy from her early 20s named Ben, and she finds him and she agrees to go on a date with him. And she realizes during that date that Ben hasn't really changed at all, but she has. And Noni, determined to see through her plan of righting the wrongs of her past, they have enough sexual chemistry that she decides to have sex with him. And I wanted to do that deliberately. And the early reviews have been funny because people have been like, no, why did she do that? Why did she make that choice? And I wanted to show that where she's at in her security in herself, where she's at in her sense of self-worth, where she's at in her belief in her own voice, and that her voice is valid and her opinion is valid and her intuition is valid. She's not in a place in the story where she feels like she can trust her intuition. So she does something, not that she doesn't want to do, it is consensual, but I think I feel like a lot of people can relate to that experience of doing something that you maybe in another frame of mind or in a more self-confident place maybe wouldn't have done. And that's kind of what kicks off this idea of her thinking about what makes her happy and her acknowledging the fact that maybe she is happy being unhappy. And what the fuck does happiness even look like? And what does joy look like? And what does pleasure look like? And she doesn't even really know what that is.
I think, yeah, not knowing is completely relatable, and you sort of just fumble your way through trying to make sense of things. Remember, I had a female friend who had never had an orgasm during sex with a dude, which I found really devastating.
It's so common, Michelle. It's so common.
Know, it makes me so sad, but we just hack it. And I feel like this book is very much like an antidote to that. It's like, no longer, no bends.
No more hacking it. No more hacking it. Yeah. Orgasms for everyone. That is the message of Noni Blake that I want to share.
That's just the pull quote from the front. Orgasms for everyone. 2020, Claire Christian.
Yeah, and it starts in kind of it starts in her thinking that pleasure is about sex and sexual pleasure and the erotic that is connected to sex. But what she actually realizes is that there is pleasure in all of her life and in all aspects of her life, and that the feeling of wanting and her own joy and being led by joy is actually what she's curious about and actually what she wants. And so I did a survey when I first started thinking about pleasure, and I wanted to write about pleasure, where over 100 and not anonymous women sent answers, and the questions were like, what does pleasure look like to you? If you had more pleasure in your life, what would that look like? Actionable things you can do. And the things that people wrote were things like, I would wear lipstick just because, or I would buy myself lingerie, or I would be the first on the dance floor. Like simple, actionable. I would eat something and not feel guilty about it. So the list that's in the book that informs Noni's idea of what pleasure actually looks like in her life is informed by real, tiny, simple, actionable things that people can have and get so I found that fascinating. It wasn't like, I'd buy a house in the Maldives. Like, it was, I want to wear lipstick and not feel bad about it. You know, that's how repressed we are. That's how, like, that's how repressive the systems that we all operate in, that's what they do to our kind of our sense of pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a big picture question as well, but like, why is women's pleasure still so taboo? Like, it's sort of seen as something that's quite indulgent. And I feel like often are people intimidated about women seeking and demanding their own pleasure? Like,
yeah, I think so.
Is it the patriarchy that's to blame, as with many other things?
For all of the things, Michelle, for all of the things.
How dare they?
Yeah, but it's totally the patriarchy. But it represses men and makes men's kind of concept of pleasure complicated. Like, we're all kind of not leaning in, or not taught, or not. Vulnerability is the big thing, because it requires vulnerability to be honest and to trust your intuition. We're told not to trust ourselves. And we also live in a society that leads us to be selfless, or martyr how busy we are, or martyr how lovely we are, and to not put ourselves first, or not consider our own intuition, and not consider what we want. That's an admirable quality in our society. But it means that we have people disconnected and in unhappy relationships, or not having orgasms in their sexual life, or not doing things that they want to do, not wearing lipstick or the things that they want to wear. So I think I'm reading a great book at the moment about pleasure activism, and about how pleasure is political, because we're taught that joy is bad, and that everything that is connected to joy and pleasure, in terms of our bodies, in terms of taking up space, in terms of how we lead our lives, means that we're kind of fighting against systems that tell us how we should be. But if we are determining how we should be, then fuck the system, you know? Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's always sort of the main takeaway for me.
Fuck the system, yes, correct.
Do you know the title of the book? Because I think, like, I would, and I think a lot of people watching would love to read the book that you mentioned.
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
Oh, okay, amazing.
My Kindle.
Because then we can all sort of check that out as a frame of reference.
Oh, is that going to come up in my camera?
Oh, pleasure activism. Oh,
yeah.
Great cover.
Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good. It's written and gathered by Adrienne Marie Brown. Follow them on Instagram. But the book is amazing. And there is another one that I'm reading at the moment as well, called The Body is Not an Apology. And that is also incredible, which is all just by Sonia Renee Taylor. And that is around, there's a great part that I read the other day around, if we just all together decided that we were going to stop buying anything from within the beauty industry, economically, every kind of system that we exist in would collapse, because the amount of money that the beauty industry earns and makes in advertising and in product sales, selling us things because we're led to believe that we're not beautiful the way that we are, we could dismantle that entire, you know, and this is never going to happen, but it's interesting to think about that whole systems exist to make us feel shit about themselves purely to make money. And what if we just made our own pleasure and feeling good about ourselves an active goal? I'm curious about what that would do to the world.
Yes, this is why I love Claire, and this is a plug for Claire and Pearl, which is her Instagram account, which you should absolutely follow, because you get daily stories and daily posts that just is just that in a nutshell and make you feel great about yourself. Love it. That's a really perfect segue, just talking about those two texts in particular, about Noni herself as a character. So she's a queer fat woman who's on a pleasure-seeking quest. Yeah. And I actually can't think of any other example of the intersection of fatness, queerness, and pleasure represented in a literary character or a literary context.
We are nowhere, Michelle. We're nowhere.
We're nowhere.
We don't exist.
But that obviously, like,
you don't have sex. Fat people aren't sexy. That's the messages we are repeatedly told. So Noni Blake was a very, very purposeful choice to be like, oh, no. Look how hot this woman is. Look at her getting laid. Look at her unashamed in her body and unashamed and navigating her insecurity. Like, Noni's not confident in herself by any means, but she is who she is, and she is trying to just work out how to be happier and how to make herself happier and give herself agency in a space where she's very rarely given agency.
No, that I definitely feel that. Just reading it for the first time, her internal journey I felt really personally empowered by, because she was really consistently actively rejecting complacency, which feels impossible sometimes when you get into a life rhythm and you feel quite stuck. When you were writing, Noni, did she inspire you? And like, have you been getting early feedback from readers on how she's inspiring other people as well? I was also personally inspired because the book came with a little coupon for passionfruit.com.au.
Yes.
So I went online and was checking that out. So yes, but back to Noni.
There is I'm allowed to share the code. So passionfruit.com.au is an indie adult store based in Melbourne. They have some amazing products, and there is a Noni Blake code. So if you want to go and check out, I think the code is just Noni Blake. And I think you get a 15% discount.
Mm-hmm.
So if Noni inspires some self-pleasure, like, go to passionfruit.com.
Oh,
yeah, that was amazing of text to do that.
Well, yes. How has Noni inspired you and the writing of her and her creation? And how is she inspiring others, are you finding, besides
me, for sure, because I've spent the last 3 years in and out kind of writing Noni and dedicated to this story, which is unashamedly a joy fest, and I wanted it to write something uplifting. I wanted to write something that is that makes the hours I have spent watching romantic comedies, the research I have done in my 36 years of life, to put that research to good use. You know, the 4,000 times that I've watched Dirty Dancing is now been actionable. Like, it's now a tax deduction, so that's good. So she has inspired my consideration of pleasure, and what would my pleasure quest look like? What are the things that I don't do, or what are the things I want more of? What are the things I think complacent is a great word. What are the things I've just become complacent about? I think the big one has been about articulating my needs, or like talking about boundaries, or speaking about what I want. I've never had a problem wearing what I wanted or doing my hair, which Noni has an issue with, but it's more the kind of soul searchy stuff that she's really inspired in me. And I hope it inspires someone to just consider what they might want, or what pleasure might look like. There was a book review the other day actually that said, I put on some lipstick and I wore this great dress today, because even though I'm in lockdown in Melbourne, because Noni Blake told me to, like, and I feel great about myself. So that reading that was amazing. Yeah. So if it inspires any kind of action like that, where people are thinking about their own needs, what a privilege that something that I've written might do that for someone.
Do you feel like Noni is now part of, I feel like there's a movement in popular culture now where we're really like championing female sexuality, and you know, you're seeing that in texts like Untamed and Eat, Pray, Love, and I know you love Outlander and 50 Shades of Grey. Like,
I don't love 50 Shades of Grey.
No,
Outlander.
Disclaimer, just Outlander. What are all these texts do you think what are they telling us about women's sexuality in the 21st century?
Yeah.
Because I remember I did this course in uni that was about popular fictions and popular culture, and we had to study those texts in order to understand how their pervasiveness was informed by what was going on, like socio-politically at the time.
Yeah, great.
That's happening socio-politically around the world, where it's like, ladies want the sex.
Or permission to be selfish. So I think like a book like Eat, Pray, Love is all about a woman stepping into her power and liberating herself through this trip. And even 50 Shades of Grey, the astronomical success of that is women wanting stories where their sexual pleasure is at the center of the tale. I don't know what the statistics specifically are, but there is some kind of amazing research that they did when Kindles or e-readers came out. The boosted sales of books like Mills and Boon and rom-coms went higher because of the shame associated with reading romance, and they linked it together that romance readers could be on the train or on the bus on the way to work, or even in their own homes, reading the books that they like to read, and no one would know. So I feel like the books that give us permission to fantasize about another version of your life, or in Untamed, which is a book by Glennon Doyle, which has had astronomical success in the last few months. That's all about a woman in her 40s, just kind of realizing that how the system has repressed her and what she wants, and how she just learns how to be herself. Like that's what it is at its core, but it's been hugely successful internationally. So I think there's a moment maybe in our landscape where people are just curious about wanting more and wanting examples of what that looks like, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. I've got to check out Untamed as well, because I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I've read it. It's great.
Love it. On that note, I want to talk about rom-coms. Yeah. I know you are a huge lover of rom-coms. You mentioned
all of them.
All of them. I want to speak about rom-com tropes, which I love because I'm also a rom-com fan. Were there any particular tropes that influenced the writing of Noni? Are there things that is a go-to for you? Because I myself love an airport chase scene.
Yes, I love an airport chase scene, correct. There had to be a grand rom-com-esque disaster leading to grand declaration.
Love it.
Yeah.
No spoilers.
No spoilers, but there had to be that moment of
and you get it in spades.
You do, yes. I deliver that up to you. I hope. Yeah, I wanted that moment where I wanted the monologue. I wanted the grand declaration of love. I wanted the very public pash in the street. I wanted that. I wanted that kind of unabashed declaration of just people who are like, no, I really fucking fancy you. Because that in itself is just the glorious joy giver that it is.
Yes. And you get all that and more with Noni's main love interest, who is Bo, aka the Viking.
The Viking, and correct.
We've talked about how you wanted him to be, firstly, dream person, emotionally intelligent, self-reflective, an aware human being.
Yeah.
He's doing self-work on himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all super sexy. And you and I also talk a lot about creating like dream people in our works. Why are we creating these beautiful idealized creatures? Like, from what part of your imagination did Bo arise?
It was because I had not watched Outlander and had nothing to do with Outlander. And then a dear friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, the beautiful Nok Fan, she said, oh my God, you need to watch this show Outlander because you need to talk to me about the main character. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. and was deeply invested with. For anyone who has not watched Outlander, it is a time-traveling romance about a woman in the 60s who touches some spiritual rocks and goes back in time and meets a very handsome Scottish man. That's a good enough summary of the plot. But he says things, and this was the moment that I was specifically like, oh my God. He says a line, and the main character's name is Claire, which also helped me in my experience of watching it. But he says this line. He says, "Claire, I want you so badly, I can scarcely breathe. Shut up." and he's beautiful, and he has these, even though he's, I don't know what century, he's in the 17th century, maybe 18th century. And I was like, what is it about this character that is so compelling? And then I was like, oh, he's written by a woman. And I was like, what would Jamie Fraser look like in 2019, 2020? And they were the qualities that I decided I wanted. A person who was emotionally intelligent, who was doing their self-work, who talked about their feelings, who was able to lean into vulnerability. And then I atoned him in the body of a very tattooed Viking. So, you know.
You've just hidden all the points, Claire. That's all we need.
That's where he came from. Yeah.
Incredible. I love that origin story because I was not aware that was it. And now I have to go back and rewatch Outlander.
Which is where Scotland came from. It's why Edinburgh is the secret nod to Noni Blake, is the secret nod to Outlander in the book. Yeah.
All of these incredible Easter eggs for future readers.
Yes.
Another rom-com trope, which I love, and you see it a lot in, I think Bridget Jones is maybe my favorite example of this, where you've got the ensemble, aka the best mates.
Yes.
And in Noni Blake, you've got Lyndall, Joan, yes, Naz. And why was this depiction of Noni's friendships important to you? Like, what's so special in particular about adult friendships?
Because I don't think we talk about how deeply important your non-romantic relationships can be in your life. So, and how lucky people are to have a person or people who see them for who they are. So that was a quality in some of the great loves of Noni's life. Unashamedly are her best friends, particularly her best friend, Lyndall, who is her mate and has been her mate forever. Because I think I wanted to look at the way that the people who love us see us is often very different to the way that we see ourselves. And I often say that to people that I care about, is if you could just see the way that you are in my head, or the way that I look at you, or the things that I love about you, if you could even just take 10% of the way that I feel about you, it would shift the way that you are in the world, I think, or it's the most heartbreaking thing, I think, when you love someone and they don't feel the same way that you do about them. I find it like I constantly say to people that I care about in quite a lovingly aggressive way, that is like, I love you, and it is offensive to me that you are being mean to someone that I love. Yeah, so that's why it was important to explore those kinds of relationships in the book, I think.
Yes, I think it's a really good reminder as well, especially in a romantic story, that, at the end of the day, when romances do or don't work out, like, the people who are always by your side or who are always there waiting in the wings are your friends.
Yes, absolutely. Or that we've been sold as well this kind of narrative that our romantic relationships need to fulfill every part of us. We must find our soulmate. We must find our best friend, our lover. And I think that's such an unrealistic pressure on relationships, because it's just not the way that we work. I think different parts of our relationships meet different needs for us. And yeah, there's no question that Noni has needs met by her best mate and by her friends that she has in the book, that her romantic relationships don't meet for her.
I think that's a really good approach to any kind of relationship in general, whether it's friendships or, you know, familiar relationships or romantic relationships.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to return briefly to our discussion earlier that we were having about giving yourself permission to pursue joy and pleasure. And it had been a long time since I'd read a book that was just really fun. And like, absolutely it challenged me, especially in terms of like assessing my own personal life darkly. But it, but it was also just like a really solid, good time. And I imagine it would have been a lot of fun to write. And I wondered whether there was a particular character or a scene that was like your favorite part to write.
Oh, I think Noni has quite a bit of sex in this book. That's not a spoiler. That's laid out in the premise. So writing those scenes, and because some of them are disastrous and awkward and hopefully funny. So writing those were, whilst deeply vulnerable, because there is a vulnerability that comes with writing sex scenes that I was unprepared for, because there's that moment where you go, what if I've been doing it wrong? Like, what if not? I'm very clearly saying to the world, like, these are versions of what is in this book is what Claire thinks is sexy. What, you know?
Here's the time to point out that many of Claire's family members are on this.
They're fully aware.
Claire's nephew and brother.
Hi, Mum and Dad.
And parents. But go on, Claire, please.
But yeah, so there's that weird vulnerability around that. So I think they were my favorite kind of scenes to write, and particularly because there was many moments in this that have been inspired by funny stories that my best mates or dear friends have told me, that with their permission I have included and fictionalized a little bit, or bastardized in some way to put in the book, because the stories are so good that they had to be shared, I think. Yeah, so as I was writing, I would kind of take photos or screenshots or text my friends and say, hey, the trumpet story is in the book. Like,
I am now shook to discover that is real. And shook to discover that a lot of the sex scenes are based on real experiences, having read the book. This might also be a not safe for work question, and you don't have to go into details. But were you like watching or reading or listening to anything in particular for, you know, inspo for the sex scene? Like, did you have like
for sure. Yeah, Outlander thankfully was already there. Yeah, because I think breaking a scene, because they're not sexy to write, because you are thinking about the mechanics of, you know, will this make sense to a reader? Is the body positioning, or where I'm talking about this person's hand or this person's mouth or this person's the experience, will this make sense to a reader? So there's a lot of the logistics that sometimes I would watch kind of my favorite sex scenes in movies to be like, oh yeah, okay, that's a good reference point. Or so yeah, so I get to watch romantic comedies and sex scenes for my job, Michelle. How have I created this magical life for myself? How?
Isn't it just insane being a writer? Because you can just claim an OnlyFans account on tax. You know, why not just do yourself? I can subscribe.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions because I'm conscious of the time, because I imagine that audience or viewers will have a lot of questions to ask. I wanted to talk about travel.
Yeah.
And this Australian rite of passage that we have of like doing, so to speak, Europe. Obviously, none of us have traveled overseas in a long time, so it was really lovely to get that escape from reading the book.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're often trying to find ourselves in other places. And somewhere into the novel, we find that Noni's trying to find herself after something that's happened to her.
Yeah.
And without giving too much away, obviously, can you talk about the role that travel plays in Noni in her life?
So she travels. So she had traveled. She had done the kind of 18 months. She'd done a trip to Europe when she was younger and had kind of a great experience, or kind of had experiences that shifted things for her, and then hadn't been back for a long time, and decides, or is inspired in terms of her desire for pleasure, to go back to Europe, to go to London and eventually go to Scotland, in pursuit of pleasure there. So I think she uses it as, or how it manifests, I think, in the novel, is a way for her to take 6 months out of her real life and go to Europe and travel and try on this different version of herself, try on this kind of pleasure seeking human being, or this lipstick wearing human being, or however this, I'm going to speak about my needs or what I want human being. And so she tries that while she's overseas. And then I very specifically wanted to talk about that idea of coming home and being like, well, I'm coming back to normal now, rather than that thing in, like, the experience of being overseas, the experience of getting to do what she does was her normal life, was her real life. It inspired what she wanted to do and become. So yeah, I wanted to look at that. I think places totally inspire us to try on different versions of ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's a really nice point. And, you know, people often talk about, like, you know, moving to a different country or moving interstate as like sort of finding a new version of themselves. But, you know, there is that whole thing of like the things that you're dealing with, you take them with you, and it's like still you wherever you are in the world. And I love that Noni retains that part of herself.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple more minutes. I want to semi wrap up by just talking about Claire generally. Okay. An ode to Claire. So, you know, anyone who's lucky enough to cross Claire's path and is doubly lucky enough to call her their friend has really hit the jackpot. She's such a genuine and cool person, and she really sees the best in everyone unless they're a dick. In which case, she's not afraid to call them out for being a dick. And her work is such an extension and embodiment of her as a person, and the work that she does on her Instagram with Claire and Pearl. I just wanted to hear you talk a bit about your own personal philosophies when it comes to things like clothing and bodies and makeup and the things that make you happy.
I think so much of, and I've always had this, even when I was younger, part of my expression had always come from clothes and from my hair in particular. Yeah, I change my hair maybe every 6 to 8 weeks. Like, my relationship with my hairdresser is the most deeply intimate relationship in my life. And I've been blessed with brilliant hairdressers throughout my life, because I just see it as a way of expression and mood. And you can tell how I'm feeling based purely on what I'm wearing or what is happening with my hair, I think. Which is why I shaved my head a few years ago, because I wanted to see what it would be like without any hair. But then that was silly, because it just became a thing that I had a shaved head. So that was what I had done to my hair. So that didn't work. But I think what I've realized is, in so many of the decisions that I make in terms of my outward appearance, I constantly get the main comment that I've always had is, you're so confident, or you're so brave, or I wish I could do that. Like, it's something that I've heard constantly. And there's this great Mindy Kaling quote where she talks about a similar thing, where she's like, people constantly tell me, oh wow, like you're you're so brave or you're so confident. And the implication of a comment like that is you shouldn't be. So for someone like Mindy Kaling, as a woman of color, as someone who is funny, as someone who has a larger body than what we are used to seeing on screens, you shouldn't be confident. And I love that sentiment because it feels the same to me. And so that's part of my kind of personal politic in particular, is people getting to be and express themselves however the fuck they want to. I think is what we need to do and what we should do. Yeah.
Well, that is why Claire is so great. And that is why this book is so great, because Noni Blake is 100% Claire. It's all about, just reading it. It's just like getting a chai with Claire. And it's kind of philosophy on sex and self-love and confidence in a nutshell, really. And it's super generous, it's super caring, it's straight talking, and like, as I say in a little pull quote endorsement at the beginning, like you just feel very safe and warm and silly reading Noni Blake.
Oh,
and
I love
feel
that.
I feel like that's a really lovely place to be in right now with the world the way it is. It's just a bit, just talking about popular fictions, which this will be and is. I feel like it's, something that we absolutely need as a bit of an antidote to 2020 and the world as it is.
I love that idea of and it was very intentional to write something that was purposely uplifting, because that's at the core of who I am as a human being. Like, joy and whimsy is my go-to. It's just very on brand for me, is joy and whimsy.
It is. This is absolutely a joyous novel, Claire. And Michelle, I think that you very eloquently highlighted that to our audience tonight. We do have a lot of questions, so I might just field a couple of them to you. First, Amy's iPhone has asked you if the subject drama, ethics and emotion influenced this novel.
Of course. So for those people who've done a drama degree as well, that it's at the core of all of this. It's why Noni is a teacher, for sure, because of my lived experience of teaching. So for my teacher mates, you get some rep in there.
Right. Samantha, I'll take this as a comment. Oh my God, the trumpet story is real, with lots of Yeah. Holly has asked, what's your greatest hope for a reader's takeaway after reading that?
That's a lovely question. I hope it is a reclamation of some part of self, or some kind of awakening of some part that had been forgotten, or maybe not even forgotten, but maybe not even considered in a while, or not thought about. So I hope what happens, my deepest hope is that people would want for something and then go for it, whatever that might be.
That is really lovely. That's great. There's a question from Kay Kerr, and this is a very pertinent question, because when I'm reading this at the moment, and all I can see is that it's going to be a movie. And Kay Kerr says, who would your dream cast be? Who would Noni Blake be?
There is a plus size American blogger named Nicolette Mason. She is kind of who Noni is in my head. But in terms of actors, maybe that we know, I always think Danielle McDonald, who is my beautiful agent Candace, that's who she thinks would be a brilliant Noni Blake, and I agree. Or even like Adie Bryant would be a beautiful Noni, because if you haven't watched Shrill, she's beautiful in that. But the very fact that it is difficult to consider who a amazing, fat, brilliant woman would be in our kind of known lexicon together, that's a fucking problem. Yeah. So I hope Noni Blake is an unknown in the film, and that people it launches some amazing badass woman's career.
Perhaps even Claire would be a great person.
Oh my God. If I get to cast the Viking, then totally.
Okay, so there's a question here from Laura. You've written plays, a YA novel, and now an adult novel. Is there a style that you've enjoyed writing more? And where do you see your writing going next?
Not that I've enjoyed more. I love them all for their kind of individual, the things that they give me. What I felt a lot of weird kind of self-imposed anxiety when I went from writing theatre to writing a YA, because I had very kind of got comfortable being like, I am a theatre maker, I am a playwright, that is what I am. And then this novel kind of bubbled up and wanted to be written. And I freaked out about that, kind of going, but I'm not a novelist. And what I've realized now is at the core of everything that I want to do in terms of my own artistry is I love telling stories, and however those stories need to be told now, whether that's a film script or for TV or adult fiction or YA. I'd love to write a picture book or like younger years series. I have a podcast, like how I love directing other people's work that I connect with. So however the stories need to be told, I will let the form find me. And I feel very privileged that I have been able to work across multiple genres and forms.
Great. So Leah has asked, there can be a perception of lipstick or haircuts or clothes as superficial, but clearly they're super important to Noni and her journey and yours. Any ideas about how we reconcile the social pressures of consumerism versus self-expression?
I think if it is led from personal want and personal joy, rather than an imposed, this is what you should do, or this is what you should, how you should be, or this is what a woman looks like, or this is what a fat person needs to be, or this is how a man should behave. I think if it is led by personal, then that's maybe how we reconcile it, rather than the imposition of what we should do. It was like a couple of years ago, I realized that I had no agency over my own body hair, that I had just been absent-mindedly waxing or shaving my own body hair since I was kind of like 14, and then felt weird about the fact that that was a decision I was making about my own body so absent-mindedly and so disconnectedly. So I went on a body hair journey and kind of grew everything out, and then consciously decided what I wanted to do, because there's nothing about the way that this is mine, this is all I have now, in terms of that, the assurance that I have is I have this. And so I wanted to be conscious about the decisions that I make. So maybe that's what it is. It's about conscious decisions about how you do your hair, or why you wear lipstick, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good answer. And we've got a couple more questions here I'll get through before we finish. One of them is from Miranda. What is the biggest thing that you would have wanted someone to tell you in your 20s?
Oh, you are okay. You are okay. Yeah, you don't have to, I think the biggest takeaway, and this is probably the biggest thing that Noni Blake has taught me, is the notion that you already know. So how we are built is perfect. We are built with a system internally that is our intuition and is our own gut and is our own kind of free thought that tells us what we think and tells us what we want. And everything else that we impose on top of that weakens that voice. But I think if that was the advice, you already know, trust that. I think that would have helped me a lot. That would have helped me a lot to go for things that I didn't go for, or to tell people I fancied them who I didn't fancy, or to say no to things that I didn't want to do, because I just didn't trust that I knew. But I did, and as do all of you.
So there's one last question here, which is, how has queerness influenced you, your life, and the writing of this book?
I feel, and how it manifests in Noni Blake is, I wanted to talk about queerness by not talking about queerness. I didn't want to discuss Noni's queerness because it is just part of who she is and how she is in the world. So the long-term relationship that ends or has ended when we meet her is with a woman, and then she meets and fancies men and women throughout the book. And I think the representation of bisexuality or any kind of sexuality that isn't a heteronormative relationship, we don't see examples of that anywhere. It's getting better, admittedly, but for me, I think my own queerness didn't come to light because I just didn't see representation of bisexuality or pansexuality anywhere, with people just falling in love with whoever they wanted to fall in love with. I had no representation. So it took my 20s and falling in love with a woman to kind of then go, oh, okay, this is part of my identity. This is part of who I am. So that was a very conscious choice for Noni Blake to have that just be the way it is. Because if someone in their early 20s or even younger reads Noni Blake and goes, oh, right, okay, that's fine. That bit about me is okay. Happy days.
Excellent. And we do have someone asking whether you have or are intending to sign books at Avid Reader. And we would,
of course,
we would love you to come in and do a signing very soon to for all these orders that are coming in with their 10% off with event.
Of course. Avid Reader is my favorite ever in the world. The fact I get to launch now my second book through Avid is just like actual dream come true territory.
Right.
Young 20-something-year-old Claire stalking into Avid to just swoon over it, now getting to be here, is pretty fucking incredible, actually.
Well, we would love you to do that very soon. So we'll organise that. And if people who are listening tonight do want a personally signed copy, I imagine that you can email us at books@avidreader.com.au and just ask for that. Pay
Please. Absolutely. I would love to do that.
To be signed to you, and tell us what you want written, and Claire will be happy to do that.
Drawn. I could maybe draw you a dick or a vagina or something as well. Just let me know.
Excellent. Lots of badges coming your way.
Happy days.
We all want, really, dicks and vaginas. Now, or, you know, a bit of food too, perhaps. And some
dicks, vaginas, and pasta. That's pretty much. Yeah. That's the name of my memoir.
Excellent. I look forward to launching that. That'd be great. Look, you two, it's been incredibly fun. It has been a bit of a bit of a COVID cure to be in your presence tonight, both of you, Michelle and Claire, and also in the presence of Noni, which has taken up a nice chunk of my day today, where I actually smiled for the first time in about 6 months.
Yay, Chrissy.
Laughed, perhaps, even. So I'm really, really happy that this book is now in the world and launched, and that people will be able to get some joy out of it.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for your participation today.
Yeah, Mish, you're the best.
Wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, how lucky we'd have Claire. How lucky we'd have Noni Blake.
And I'm at the last today. I've allowed people to unmute themselves so that we can do a final round of applause, just like we're in real life. So you're welcome to lean forward and unmute yourself from your device, and then we can have a clap. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Oh, look at that. How's that for service? Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Avid. Thanks to Tex. Thanks to my editor, Sam. Like, thank you. This is amazing. This is so glorious.
There's a beautiful picture there as well.
Cheers. Oh, Karen, that's amazing. Beautiful. Cheers, everyone.
See you later.
Wow, much